Um, we're going to now hear from Fleur Blüm and Asako Saito, who are very generously joining us from Australia. It's quite late there. Fleur and Asako are the former and current presidents of the Life Model Society, an organization we will learn more about in their talk, Model as Worker, Raising the Model Status with the Life Model Society. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Zoe. Good evening from Australia. Thank you for inviting us to give this talk. It's our privilege to be here and to present the perspective of life models to you all. We hope that you will leave this presentation with a renewed appreciation and respect for all that models do to enable the art of life drawing. It's in the interests of both models and artists that we have a congenial and professional relationship, one that is rooted in respect for the welfare and dignity of all life models. My name is Asa, and I'm the current president of the Life Model Society. With me today is Fleur, who was president of the organization from 2020 to 2023. We are speaking to you today from Naarm, also known as Melbourne, Australia, on the lands of the Wurundjeri, Woiwurrung and Bunurong peoples. I want to acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded. This land always was, and always will be, Aboriginal land. Now, for the artist, the studio is a place to draw, it's a place to paint and sculpt. It's a place to create art. But for the model, the studio is a workplace. Like workers in any workplace, the model must be treated professionally, and models expect all worker rights to be upheld. Now, this framing of the model as worker is simple but powerful. At the Life Model Society, we find that most of our employers are groups of artists who are pursuing a hobby or a study, and often this congenial or learning environment can overshadow the model's need for a safe workplace. So we hope that this framing of modeling as work proves useful to you when engaging models. We've structured this presentation in 3 parts. We first explore life modeling issues in the past, then the present, then emerging. So I will now pass you on to Fleur, who will kick us off with a brief introduction into the history of our organization and the history of life modeling as work. Over to you, Fleur.
Thanks, Asa. So I'm just showing some sketches of models that we have collected from our membership. And this one I'll just leave while we talk about the history. This is one of our very early members, Hannah, modelling for a sculpture which appears on the County Court building here in Melbourne by William Eichholtz, I think is how you pronounce that. So the Life Model Society, or the LMS, is a collective of models run entirely by volunteers who work to promote the welfare and dignity of life models. We do this by running workshops for aspiring models and members. We produce a list of active professional models in Melbourne, which is purchased by artists, venues, and educational institutions. The LMS also does significant work in advocating in workplace disputes between members, subscribers, employers, and other relevant parties. The LMS was formed in 1989. In Melbourne by a small group of models who identified that the solitary nature of life modelling and the vulnerability of life models as workers were risks to their ongoing work safety. The founding members felt that models were inadequately protected as workers. They did not have an understanding of appropriate or market value competitive rates of pay and did not have collective bargaining power or formalised avenues for raising concerns and complaints. From this initial small group, the Life Model Society is now a collective of approximately 180 members or models today. So artists have worked with models for a long time. During that time, models have frequently been vulnerable people. I think we can take from Kat's presentation a few more stories. Models have been often excluded from traditional lines of work. Life drawing, by definition, requires a sitter or model. Otherwise, it's still life or landscape. And while pastoral views and bowls of fruit are lovely to look at, the human form has held our attention for millennia. The relationship of model or sitter and artist takes various forms. Throughout history, there are many examples of the sitter commissioning the work for portraits of nobility and the like. In that instance, the model is the employer and can therefore determine the terms of engagement. On the other hand, many artists engage models as their employees to collaborate to create their works. In these situations, the model is often holding tension between the artist's vision, their livelihood, and their body. In this image, we can see Ophelia by Sir John Everett Millais. This one was painted between 1851 and 1852 and is a classic example of when this model relationship has gone awry. In this work, the model, Elizabeth Siddall, was required to pose fully clothed in a bathtub of water. It was winter, and despite Millais putting oil lamps under the bath to keep the water warm, they were allowed to go out, and Siddall was made ill as a result. It's said that her father demanded £50, and think of how much that's worth in 1852, for medical expenses as a result of this illness, though it's unclear what sum was paid. In that example, the price the model paid for her work was her health. It's unclear here whether she was had long-standing health issues as a result of the engagement. On the other hand, I'm also going to use Lucian Freud. You can see here And the Bridegroom from 1993. The model for this at the front is Nicola Bowery, and she's written fondly of her time working with the artist during the 90s. She states, the modelling would last 35 to 40 minutes before a break of 10 to 15 minutes. Lucian painted every day, including Saturdays and Sundays. So I, for instance, sat 3 mornings and 5 to 6 nights a week. Lucian thought that a well-fed model would be more docile and settled and would sit for longer sessions at a time. Here we see being warm, physically comfortable, well-fed, well-rested and at ease with the artist can create a mutually beneficial relationship.
As Fleur has demonstrated, and as we saw from Kat's presentation earlier, the life models experience throughout history has varied. Some models enjoy fantastic collaborative relationships with the artists, but others don't. As we move into the second section of our presentation, I want to bring your attention to what we feel represents best practice for the life model worker in the context of our contemporary neoliberal world. The LMS positions the model as worker, an active agent rather than a passive muse. We strongly feel that using the framework of model as worker and artist as employer is helpful in recontextualizing the model-artist relationship, which is conventionally a relationship with a strong power imbalance. So to emphasize the positioning of model as worker, we developed a list of 16 working conditions. These address common issues encountered in the studio, both within and outside of the studio. We encourage all life models and artists to adopt these conditions as their own. And we have the hyperlink to the working conditions on the slide if you would like to have a look at our website yourself. So we expect any model who wishes to become a member of the LMS to adhere to these working conditions. And similarly, any artist who wishes to employ our models is required to follow them. Breaches in the conditions can lead to warnings and expulsions from the LMS. For today, I would like to highlight 4 of our working conditions. Let's begin with working condition number 4. In Victoria, life modelling takes place in 20-minute blocks. For longer drawings, the model will repeat the pose after a 10-minute break. This condition was developed based on medical advice, and we have adopted it to minimize the risk of pain, nerve damage, and injury for the models. Some artists push boundaries by seeking longer poses and shorter breaks. Models can refer to this condition to push back on such requests. To ensure that models only work in 20-minute blocks, we also encourage models to do their own timekeeping. This is because one of our members sustained chronic injuries due to a university lecturer not alerting them at the 20-minute mark. citing later that they did not want to disturb their students who were too engrossed in drawing. Because of this, the model held the pose for too long, and 15 years later, they still suffer pain from this incident. The next working condition, number 7, is about the minimum rate of pay for models. Here in Melbourne, models get paid a minimum of $45 an hour, and the minimum call-out is 2 hours, so $90 per engagement. And I really want to stress that this is the minimum rate. Many models hold personal minimum rates that exceed this amount, and we always encourage models to ask for more. To my knowledge, life models here in Melbourne have the highest minimum rate of pay in the world. Anecdotally, I've heard that models in the UK average about £15 an hour, though the Register of Artists Models recommends £20. A model in the US once told me they get paid $12 to $20 an hour. Because of our high rates, we often have international models come here for work. Now, the next working condition, number 8, is about the minimum rate of pay for photographic work. For this, we charge $85 an hour, again, with the minimum call-out of 2 hours. So this minimum rate is specifically for modeling involving photography. The rate applies to time for portfolio work and reference photography work. So you may be wondering, what do we mean by reference photography? Well, by that we mean photos taken of a pose to complete a non-photographic artwork outside of a session. In contrast, fine art photography means where the photography itself is the finished product. For models who are engaging in photographic work, we encourage them to use our model release template. And again, this is available on our website for you to use. This is a consent and release form that limits the use of said photography. For example, if the model agreed for the photo to be used for a certain purpose, the artist cannot use the work for any other purpose without renegotiating the form. Next, we will look at working condition number 16. We do not allow photography in the studio unless it was consented to by the model at the time of booking. If phones need to be used in the studio, we ask the cameras on the phones to be covered up with opaque tape or blue tack. At this point, I would like to hand over the reins to Fleur, who is going to share some anecdotes regarding this condition.
Thanks, Asa. I'd also like to add that the tape or blue tack applies to drawing tablets or other electronic devices. So a couple of experiences that I've had myself are I was posing for a repeated 20-minute pose, and while nude in the room, somebody asked if I could just hold still while they take a photograph, to which I said, no, that's not something that I would agree to. I've also been asked to pose for a photo for promotional work. Again, not offered compensation for that, despite the fact that the business was using that image to create business for themselves. I've also had experiences where often unknowingly, an artist has pulled out their mobile phone to take a photograph of the work that they're currently doing while I'm still in a pose in the background of that photo. And it's not possible for me to know or to feel safe that I'm not included in that image. It's also worth mentioning that photography without consent in a private space in Victoria is a crime, and it's called image-based abuse. So it can be a police matter. An example of that we had when I was the president was that a model was posing for a particular artist. That artist used their mobile phone to take a photograph of that model from underneath a table. That artist then published that photo on Facebook without consent or without letting that model know. The model found the photo, complained to the Life Model Society. We then approached that artist with disciplinary action. That artist was removed from the organisation and was not welcome to rejoin. We also commented to the venue where that issue took place, and the venue withdrew their support from that artist as well. So they were excluded from both the venue and the LMS and developed quite an unpleasant reputation.
Thank you for sharing those, Fleur. So that is the the 4 working conditions that we're going to highlight today. It's worth noting, though, that the working conditions is a living document, and we revise the working conditions periodically to suit the concerns of the day. So in the presentation so far, Fleur and I have talked about the past and present of life modeling. To conclude our talk, we would like to touch upon what we see as the emerging issues in life modeling in Victoria, a more diverse and inclusive workforce. To protect models and the artist-model relationship, and to sustain the industry into the future, we propose that the model as worker is an essential starting point for any and all advocacy work going forward. The nature of models' work and the often vulnerable cohort mean that specific attention must be given to protecting and promoting a diverse and inclusive workforce. Over to you, Fleur.
Thanks, Asa. So the first topic I'd like to discuss as part of our diversity section is gender. Kat mentioned that many of the memoirs she's read are of female models. The list of life model members of the LMS is currently 2/3 women and has been approximately 2/3 women for the entire time that I've been aware of the organisation. Historically, the female body has been available to be viewed in artworks, both nude and clothed, and is considered both tasteful and classical. As a result, there are artists here in Melbourne who have told male models that there is no place for them in the industry. For us, all bodies are good bodies and all people are good models, assuming that they can sit still. To suggest that some bodies are deserving of being gazed upon and not others based on their gender reinforces dangerous gender stereotypes and puts male models at risk of exploitation from artists who wish to suggest that the male body is not worth the same pay. Consumption of female bodies as a commodity is commonplace in many domains, including advertising and film and television industries. Women's bodies are considered available for consumption at all times, and diet culture and fashion have created whole industries based on telling women their bodies are wrong. Selling body dissatisfaction is increasingly being directed at men too. Life models have some crossover and siblinghood with adjacent industries such as sex work. The LMS has seen an increase in the number of erotic services, specifically life drawing as an activity for hens or bucks nights, bachelorettes and bachelor parties, which attempt to use life models as cut-price sex workers. The LMS strenuously objects to this for 2 reasons. Firstly, life models should not be put into eroticized or higher risk situations without being appropriately paid for this added work and added risk. But secondly, life models should not undercut their sex worker siblings by taking business which would more appropriately go to sex workers for a reduced fee. The list of model members that the LMS provides is divided into 3 sections: feminine-bodied, androgynous-bodied, and masculine-bodied. This was changed from male and female bodies to more inclusively represent trans and non-binary models. We see a much higher proportion of queer, gender diverse, and trans models in our community as compared to the general population, where it's approximately 10%. Trans models often hold tension between expectation management, that is, having employers understand what configuration of body parts the model they are employing has, and the risk of being hired as, at best, a novelty, or at worst, a sideshow. Trans models may lose work because of their open transness, particularly from conservative or educational environments, or be forced to explain their existence to an ill-educated group. Their bodies also present unique opportunities to draw bodies that are not usually available to be gazed upon. So I now just have a couple of visual aids. Here we can see models Marlon and Felipe, both men who are posing in high-heeled shoes. We can also see one image of, that's actually myself, posing in a pose that I call mansplaining, which I think is a traditionally masculine pose. This one also features our model Ed, who is an openly trans model. The second thing I want to talk about is disability. And I think it's interesting to note that disability was also mentioned in Kat's presentation. Life models come to the profession for different reasons. As a short-term gig or a supplementary income in early adulthood or later in life. There are many models who continue in the job for years or decades, though they are in the minority. Many of our members stay for a few years and then move on. In our experience, life models, particularly long-term models, are people who find working in normal jobs challenging for a variety of reasons. We see very high rates of mental health concerns, invisible or non-apparent disabilities, and neurodivergence. The gig nature of modelling creates opportunities to exploit workers. Models may be living paycheck to paycheck and may need to take a job they would otherwise decline in order to pay rent or feed themselves or their dependents. In a cohort with disabilities and differences such as those described above, their ability to advocate for themselves is likely to be compromised by both their disability and their need for income. Here I have some images of a model, Alison, who has a non-apparent disability. I'll hand over to Asa.
Thank you, Fleur. Now, the third topic on diversity we'll look at is race. The life drawing community here in Melbourne and Victoria is pretty white, and the life modelling community is similar. When I first joined the LMS, I did not know any models of colour working in Victoria, and today they are still in the minority. But over the past few years, there has been an increase in models of colour working in the industry. So to prepare for this part of the presentation, I reached out to some models of colour within our organisation to hear their stories. And I want to stress that their stories vary. They belong to models, some who were born in Australia, some were born elsewhere, some have dark skin, some have light skin. And because of this, the stories reflect a diverse range of experiences. So I would like to talk about some of the topics that they touched upon during the interviews. First of all, we talked about the discomfort with the term people of colour or models of colour. People thought that it didn't really feel like a satisfying term, and some people preferred to use terms like brown or black to describe themselves. Models told me about the use of racialized language in life drawing sessions. For models of Asian descent, words like Oriental and exotic were often used. They also spoke about the cultural and social stigma from within their own communities that makes them hide their life modelling profession from their family and friends. Some models said that they enjoy the work because they can challenge the artists to use different mediums, different colours to portray models of colour in their work. However, models of colour did tell me that they noticed a projection of whiteness from the artists onto their bodies. So by this I mean models of colour might be drawn with Caucasian features, for example. The models told me that when tense situations occur, they want to speak up. However, speaking up can be exhausting, and it can be dangerous because it often leads to further criticism, further scrutiny, and further gaslighting. So although life modelling is becoming increasingly diverse, it was clear from the interviews I conducted that there is still much room for improvement. We must balance diversifying the model workforce with protecting models of colour from covert racism in employing them as an exotic curiosity. Now, on the next slides, I have a few examples of images produced with models of colour. In this image, the model is myself, and sometimes when I model, I like to bring some of my heritage in. And as I was a martial artist for a long time, for this particular session, I brought my gi in and I demonstrated a few roles, which I asked the artist to draw. And on the next slide, we have a beautiful painting by a local artist, Peter Rochella, of one of our models of colour, Krishan. So now we move on to the conclusion. The LMS has guided the professionalisation of life modelling in Victoria, Australia. We have shaped a culture that values model welfare and dignity, bringing solidarity and connection to a workforce that is conventionally isolated and disparate. This has been possible through collective action and the framing of model as worker. We invite everyone here to use and adopt our working conditions to improve the welfare and dignity of all life models. If you'd like to know more, please check out our website, lifemodelsociety.org.au, and you can send us an email at thelifemodelsociety@gmail.com. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you so much for sharing your experiences and the experiences of your members and those really insightful, important working conditions. There's a lot to talk about in those. I want to remind everyone that you can submit questions in the Q&A at the bottom of your screen or in the chat for the panelists to see.